Welcome to Squirrel, the podcast for distracted writers, hosted by Candace J. Thomas and Jody L. Milner. Hey everybody, this is another Squirrel podcast, and I'm Jody L. Milner.
And I'm Candy.
And Candy and I are trying new things, so this is going to be fun.
Yeah, sure. We love new things. We love to try stuff. So it's the same craziness that's happening. It's just in a different place.
Absolutely.
That's all.
So we are going to continue our new year, getting ready kind of idea. And so today's whole episode is about self-editing. I'm not sure how many of you participated in Nanowrimo last November.
I know that I tried. Well, actually, though, I said I was going to try. And that's not, I did try, kind of. I mean, I was there.
Didn't you end up making a quilt?
Yes, I had 2 great days before my life got busy. So yeah, that's about it. That's that. So for all of you who did Nano, great for you. Good job.
So whether you did write a Nano project, or maybe you have a project that's been sitting on your hard drive forever that you're like, it's time for me to do something with that, this episode is totally for you. You might think editing is something you have to leave to the professionals, but the truth is you can do a lot to improve your work before investing a single cent.
Yes, and I think that actually does you. It's incredible how much editing can cost.
It is impressive.
And if it's taking them more time to finish your project, then it wasn't ready to begin with.
No, and that's why we want to help you avoid the not being ready.
Yeah.
And so we're going to start this conversation with talking about the phases of editing. And they, like every beautiful thing, it falls into 3. We love 3s.
Yeah, there's rules of 3. I think I put that in the notes. Yeah, the concept of 3.
All right, and for self-editing, you want to start with the largest concept possible. So your first round of edits should always be looking at the entire story as a whole and making sure that it works. And this is called either a content edit or a substantive edit. You're looking at the substance of your story and you're making sure all the big moving pieces work. So there's some questions you want to ask yourself. And one of the biggest, most basic questions is, does your story have a beginning that makes sense, a middle that makes sense, and an end that makes sense? Stop me if you know where I'm going with this.
Well, and it's so funny how the evolution of a story happens. I mean, I don't think that I ever had an ending that I absolutely knew that was the ending that I had planned. Honestly, it always evolved more while I was writing. So that first pass that I usually do is very, I don't know, it's super messy. I'll say that. Just because I'm still creating. My brain's still active and still going.
And that's the beauty of drafting, is you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to follow all of those different ideas and get them down. And then when you go back, you decide if those ideas are doing good things or maybe they're distracting from your story. And so your substantive, that's a word I'm not going to be able to say, your content edit is where you're going to want to look at that. Another question you want to ask yourself is, are characters making choices that make sense for who you have set them up to be?
Yeah.
So if you've set them up to be a really smart character, you have to make sure they're not doing things that are
dumb
stupid.
Things.
And I do see this all the time where they present a really smart character and then they have like a really big choice to make and they end up making the stupidest choice. And it's like, for reasons of the plot. I'm like, no.
No, and it seems out of character.
That.
Yeah.
For when it feels out of character, then like there's a mismatch.
Yeah.
Another thing you want to look at in these big content edits is your level of description, because there's this fine line between not enough and too much.
Yeah.
And you'll know this about yourself already if you tend to be a over descriptive writer or if you tend to have to go back and fill in the blanks.
What are you?
I tend to be a bit skeletal in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back and I'm like, oh, wait, I forgot to describe where they are. And I'll have to weave that in afterwards.
I focus on dialogue and character a lot. And then I realize that when I go through that like second pass, I realize that I assume that the reader knows what I'm talking about when I know I didn't even put that in there. So, and that's how, I mean, when I write, I write in skeletal sections. Like I do conversations a lot. So there's a lot of blank in filling in the description and the world building and all that. So,
and one of the last questions you want to look at when you're looking at this really broad scale is, does your setting and all of the choices you've made according to your setting, like how your government works, does that make sense as well?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that came up when it comes to a content edit that are just kind of the biggest of the things to look at. Are there other big things that you think we should consider?
Well, I mean, you're talking specifically about world building, which is what we've done for fan. But there's also details that might need to be explored when you're doing something contemporary. That's just another, a self-check of, did you get these details? Or part of your research, did you look far enough at the research to get the answers that your characters need? Those little things that when you're writing and you go, oh, like for me, when I'm writing, I'll sometimes just put a box, a comment that says, check on this later, because I don't want to interrupt my creativity, but I will go back to those sections.
And I love the comment feature for this.
Yes, exactly.
So it's just like, I don't want to think about this right now, but it's important.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Comment. Do you write in Word?
I will do my initial writing in Scrivener.
Okay.
But I'll do all my editing in Word.
Gotcha. Well, and that's where, I write in Word, but that's where most editing happens. And if you submit things to editors, just be aware, people, that they like it in Word, because the editing features are pretty awesome when it comes to editing, highlighting, collaborative effort, I'll say, when it comes to like the track changes.
Yep. The current standard practice,
yes,
is to interact with your editor in Word.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to the next level of editing that you can do on your own.
I'll take over this part.
You want to handle?
You've been talking too much.
Well then.
I mean, this is your episode, and your outline is beautiful.
I was going to hand it off to you graciously, but you can just seize control.
Well, I just don't want you to have to talk too much. So line editing or copy editing, right? This is where you get down to the specific sentences and the word choices and all the heavy stuff that you have to look at. That I think that people look at as editing, honestly, because you're not doing any of the content. This is where you're slashing some of the sentences or improving some of the sentences. So we're talking about grammar or spelling or word choice, right? We want to strengthen some of those word choices. This is where you go and you try to find the weaknesses that you have in your writing. Do you have any tricks for that?
So in the beginning, if you're not used to going through and trying to figure out what's good and what's not, I would suggest looking up a list of common writing weaknesses and then doing Control Find to see if you can spot where they show up in your manuscript or your story. Mm-hmm. Often the presence of a lot of ly words means that you're not choosing strong enough verbs to begin with. Not saying you can't do ly words. It's just saying if you're seeing a whole lot of them, there might be a pattern where you can strengthen your language. Another thing is, like, a lot of people have repetitive phrases they tend to lean on, and they don't realize it. And so if you find yourself saying specific words a lot of times, if you do that, again, that find utility, it will highlight all of those words and it'll help you see opportunities to use something different or stronger.
And you don't recognize those in your immediate voice until you highlight them and go, oh yeah, this is like my characters smile a lot. Did I know that? Well, here we are. Look at all these smiling. As an editor, I often find filler words. Mm-hmm. Filler words are just like those words that you don't actually like that.
And I want to do a whole episode on this. I think this would be an amazing one. So we would love to talk more about this in length.
Yes.
In a future.
That's fine. But so finding those filler words is also a way of strengthening your editing.
Absolutely. So once you go through on a sentence level, making sure your grammar makes sense, making sure all of that works technically, you're now down to the word level editing, and this is proofreading.
Yeah.
Proofreading is typo hunting. Like, essentially, it's making sure there isn't any random things that have stuck in there that, like, your grammar check or your spell check won't catch.
Yes.
Like if you use the wrong to or the wrong your.
Yeah, they're not going to be found if you just do a quick spell check because they're actual words.
And so this is where you need to do a laser type focus. I really like having the computer read the story to me and I follow along.
Yes.
Because it forces me to look at each word and not skim.
Do you use just the function you say you do your editing in Word. Do you use that
Word
function?
has a read aloud function.
Yeah.
It's tricky to find, so if you've never done it, Google it for the steps.
Yeah.
But I love having it read to me because I hear so many things that's just like, oh my gosh, that sounds really weird.
Yeah.
I can make that better. I can make that clearer.
I use a program called Speechify, and this is specific, like I use this for a lot of things, but Speechify is it's kind of like a read to me program, and you can put it on anything once you get that that subscription. So I like it to read to me, and it has the AI programming, so you can have Snoop Dogg or Barack Obama or all these celebrities. So it's interesting to hear Snoop Dogg read your man. Just saying, it's amusing. But you can find in different voicing, you can find different mistakes. It's interesting how
That's really cool.
Yeah, how that I don't know.
Mine sounds boring now. The last thing you do want to check in your proofreading is consistency, like certain words that in your world are capitalized or not. Like you need to make sure it's always capitalized or you need to make sure it's always italicized. However you treat it, you need to make sure it's treated the same way throughout the entire manuscript. That falls into the proofreading category.
Yeah. I also, and I don't know if this is a person's normal pet peeve, but I look for smart quotes. So there's smart quotes and straight quotes. And if you work in your document at different times or in different computers, you can sometimes get these straight quotes instead of these the
curly
ones. And this is something that people just aren't used to or adjusting to see. You can in Word, you can program it to find those smart quotes or straight quotes or whatever. And but if you it can be a little tricky if you have straight quotes going to a smart quote and you haven't done that before. Sometimes it'll reverse it. You just have to watch. Just watch for those.
So now we've talked about the bones of doing a self-edit. There are some other ways you can improve your work, and these come down to different programs you can use in addition to Speechify or a document reader that can really help you take your work to the next level before you end up hiring an editor. And so do you want to speak to about beta readers?
Beta readers. Do you have beta readers?
I used to.
Okay.
I find myself using them less and less.
Do you? I have a few specific people, you know who you are, that will read my stuff before anyone else sees it. And I'm very protective about my work, and people can, I think that's normal maybe for people to be weirded out by, I mean, getting secrets out or letting people, like your manuscript slip. I mean, let's bring up like Midnight Sun from Stephanie Meyer. Was just a writing exercise basically from turning it to Edward's point of view, and she lent that to somebody to read, and then it just exploded on the internet, and then everyone had a copy. I remember somebody sending me a copy of that, and I didn't want to read it because how invasive is that? That just seemed intrusive. I didn't like that. So I'm very protective of my manuscripts. They only go to a certain few people, and they, it should be someone other than your family.
Absolutely. Do not trust. I mean, you can trust them, but anyone that you live with or feed is not an unbiased reader.
Yes.
There was a third part of that equation, but I'm not allowed to say it on the podcast. It rhymes with duck.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, my husband doesn't ever read my stuff, so it's not even a thing.
Candy has been marked safe from the family beta read.
Oh, goodness. I'm blushing, guys. I'm blushing. Okay, some software. What kind of software do you use then?
I don't really have one that I've purchased that's in addition to the one that comes with Word.
Gotcha.
When I do anything online, though, I do have Grammarly turned on so I don't make stupid mistakes in my emails because sometimes I type fast.
Me too.
And I don't want to say
really
anything I don't want to say. And it keeps me honest.
I should do that. Honestly, I don't.
But I like having it turned on just because it will catch the little dumb stuff. Word for me gets me 95% of the way there. And I've now done enough projects where I feel like the little grammar stuff isn't going to be my biggest problem. It's going to be making dumb character decisions. Mm-hmm. That's my big problem.
Gotcha. All right. What is the Hemingway thing? You have
that is a really interesting online resource, and they do have a free level where it will do a certain amount of analysis in your manuscript and highlight like frequently used words and like sentence structure. If you have a specific sentence structure you use a lot, like using a prepositional phrase first. I did that as a baby writer with every single phrase because I thought it made me sound like I was authoritative and had gravitas. No, it made me sound like I was a baby writer. I fixed that. And so it will highlight all of these little things as an instructional aid to show you where it's seeing things that could be improved.
Yes.
And the paid one has some really cool features where it will give you like book comps of what it thinks your writing is most similar to, which I think is cool, but I won't pay for things unless I absolutely have to. So
gotcha. I know that some out there listening to this are bloggers. And I know blogging, for me, I use Yoast. Yoast is just a tool that tells you exactly this is a week using passive here. This is using the same words here. And it shows you the strength of your blog and the places that you can go and fix. So I like that. I use that for my different blogging as well, just to improve the readability.
So there is one thing that I forgot to mention, and this is something that everyone has made the mistake once and then they never do it again. It's where you do a control find for a specific word. They're like, I'm changing this character's name from Bob to Stephen. And then it will find every instance of the letter combination B-O-B and change it to Stephen. Now, should any of the English language words have B-O-B in the middle, they're now going to have a Stephen.
Yep.
You only make that mistake once.
Yep, I've made that mistake.
Or twice if you're Candy.
The thing that happened to me, and this was when I had someone else, I had like an assistant going through my editing, just trying to clean it up for me. And this is one of the reasons why I'm kind of protective of my manuscripts is there's the rule of the double space. So the double space and the single space. So single space is now the preferred writing expression instead of double spacing after a period to clarify your sentences. Because you can, if you move that just to a single space, you're saving space in a manuscript, in a novel. So that's one of the things that they consider when you're moving to a publisher. So I had this person who was going through my stuff think that I had double spacing when I didn't. And she went through and changed all of these double spaces, which what it did is it mushed my manuscript. So now there was no spaces between my periods.
Oh, that would have been such a pain to fix.
It was awful. It was really awful. It took me forever to fix, because I mean you can do a control find and have it
for each letter
to
the
do
alphabet.
All that. Yeah, it was awful. So I did what I could with just trying to control find and entering in that space, but it doesn't matter. You have to go through the entire manuscript anyway to find all those things. So that's just a beware of you are amen to that. Do not just control find things.
Do not do anything blindly.
Yeah.
It will bite you.
You should accept every single thing.
Take a look at every little choice you need to make.
Yep.
There's no cheats.
Yep.
So the programs we mentioned, so there's Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid. Those do pretty much the same thing as the Windows Grammar. And then there's a Hemingway editor. That's an online tool. There's also one called Author AI. Those two are also very similar. Different little features of each one. So if you're interested in them, they do have educational material. Our next conversation, though, is when you've done all of this pre-editing for yourself, you've gone through and you think you've made your work as good as it can be. When is it time to bite the bullet and hire that editor?
Then
You're right.
When you're ready, when you're so sick of this manuscript, so sick of it that you just want someone else to see it because you cannot see all the issues or the problem. And you no longer can. You can't look at it.
No, and
you have to throw it.
What you're like, any edits you do feel like reinventing the same thing over and over again.
You just get tired, tired of looking at the story. It's time to move on.
Absolutely.
So.
It's kind of crazy though, because I will run into people who have this opinion that they are different and they can look at their manuscript as if they'd never seen it before, and then they can edit it like a professional. And if you're feeling like that's you, it's not.
I don't know those people. Who's that?
No matter how amazing you think you are about looking at it as if you were someone else, you're not. You still have all of the characters and the settings and the world building in your brain when you're reading it. And so you're going to think you've done it perfectly. And a reader's going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about because I am not in your head.
Yep.
So everyone could benefit from an editor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, you just can't. No. Be aware. You have to go through an editor. That's something you just, sorry. And I'll say one of these things about editing. Your name is your brand. So if you don't do, a good thorough edit, it shows up in your manuscript.
Oh yeah.
It shows up in yours.
And generally on the first page. I swear it. Every single time there's going to be a typo on the first page.
Yeah. And those reviews never,
Nope.
honestly. So it'll always show that you got those, even though you might have gone and fixed it. It's going to show.
All right. So when you go about editing your own work, do you have a process?
I do bones, muscle, skin. That's my basic, my own mantra. So, I mean, you've got the skeleton of the structure. And then, so my second pass is usually beefing it up. That's where I miss, as I said, I need to fill in the description. I need to find all of the juicy world building parts that I didn't put in or heightened a lot of the emotional. This is the strength of the story. That's where the most come in. And the skin is just making it pretty. That is the
cosmetic side.
Yes, exactly. I want to make sure that I have all my smart quotes, all my grammar right and all that kind of. So that's
So my process is pretty similar. I'll as I'm writing the draft, if it's been a day or two since I've have worked on it, I will go back in this chapter and I will skim through it and I will fix anything that glares at me then. And sometimes that's going to be my writing session because I'm obsessive and it happens. But if I get to the end of the chapter and get to write the new stuff, I go boldly forward and keep going forward and forward. And then I'll let it sit. Not too long, but I will write a short story in between as a palate cleanser.
Okay.
So
it's like resting the meat.
Yes. I need to let it, get all juicy. And then I'll go through a big overall look at it to make sure the big stuff is fixed, like Candy was saying, and then work my way down like we kind of described before. And my last step is always that listening pass to make sure that everything is exactly how, it sounds good, yay, but it also is very clear. There's nothing that's that phrase is really confusing the way it's written. It's clunky, it's long, and when you're listening to it, you can hear that.
Yeah.
Has your process changed since when you began?
Of course.
Did you used to do really dumb things that now you're like, why did I do that?
In editing?
Yeah.
Sometimes. I don't know if well, that's a good, how about you? Because I'm
so
stumped.
At one point, someone's like, don't use the word that. Every time you use the word that, you need to make sure it needs to be there. Mm-hmm. And so I would literally do a control find. And my first book, there was 4,000 that's. Mm-hmm. I'm like, that sounds high, but I don't know what's normal. And I went through each one of those 4,000 that's one at a time and tried to decide if it needed to be there or not. Mm-hmm. And now I think twice every time I think about writing a that.
Do ya?
because I think I scared myself a little.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to make these exhaustive lists of things I thought were weak language, weak words, bad phrasing, repetitive language. And
Right.
I would hunt and destroy them from my manuscript. And I find I don't do that anymore because the listening pass reveals most of that to me. And I'll catch 90% of it. And then the rest can be there. It's okay. It's language.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think so my first book, my series was bought by a publisher. So this was something I had, I think my first manuscript was 120,000 when I sold it to the publisher. And they went through and so this is my very first editing ever. I went through
Wait, you'd never been edited before that?
Specifically, no. I mean, I had my father going through it. He was pretty smart, but that's
different.
That is different. So I didn't have anybody else looking for this. Now, I'm reminding you that this is more than 10 years ago when this was happening. So self-publishing wasn't a big market like it is now. So I was going through the whole editing process with an editor, with a publisher. So when they went through it and they saw the things that I didn't need, like we took out chapters, right? I think we talked about this before. Where they chunked out chapters, and that was the thing that I suddenly noticed about my own writing, was that if it doesn't drive the story, should it be there? So that is something in my rookie baby mistakes of writing, is I would often get distracted and write a bunch of fluffy things that didn't need it, that weren't propelling. So that's another thing that you could probably do before it hits a publisher or an editor itself.
Absolutely. The first time I was professionally edited, it was a short story I'd submitted, and I didn't know what to expect. Other than it could be really hard. They might be really mean. They might rip your story to shreds. I'm like, I know this is good. This is, in the end, it's supposed to make things better, and this is good. Mm-hmm. But seeing your work coming back, even if it was a short story, like someone had bled all over it digitally, it's really daunting. But this editor was really good, and they were excellent at pulling out the little pieces that are really work on this. I would love this, and then great. And so that was really great. And so I'm like, this is going to be my experience with my next editor. It's going to be roughly the same. No. Because my next editor was a very different person who inserted, and I forget the exact number, but 19,000 inserts or comments into my manuscript. There was not a single sentence that she did not touch.
Oh my goodness.
And
that seems
that was excessive.
Yeah, no, that is rewriting it in their language, not yours.
And that's I came to realize that later, but I'm like, oh, this is a book level edit. This is somebody who is trying to make sure everything is perfect. Maybe this is the expectation for a book level one. It's not.
No. Because
I went on to my third editor, which is the one I'm sticking with, as long as humanly possible. Where it's very much I'm only going to identify the top 3 things that make sense for you to make a big effort in making a huge change on. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, if we feel there's something else that comes up, then I might give that to you. But if not, let's focus on the most important stuff first and not overwhelm you. And then she still is like, get your chocolate out. This is going to have stuff in it you don't want to hear. And she's extremely realistic, and I love it.
The trick about editing and having been an editor is a really good editor is someone that is invisible. So you have to promote the voice of the author, but you also have to make it clear.
There's a spider behind you, and it's really distracting.
Oh, this little?
Yeah, it's a little baby, tiny one. It's not going to cause a problem.
We're going to let it live.
He's okay.
He's just fine.
As long as you're good with it, because he's closer to you.
We'll call him Charles. He's fine. Charles is just fine. He's going to join us for the rest of All right, I think we're ready to submit our manuscripts to editors. I think we're ready.
Absolutely. Just rinse and repeat until you feel good.
Right?
All right, some practical advice, though, before we finish up for today. Remember to start big before hyper-focusing on the tiny thing. So if you are reading your entire manuscript, but you haven't, and you're thinking, oh, I need to make sure all my commas are right, but you haven't looked at, does my character work? You might be ripping out entire scenes, entire chapters. You might be putting things in a different order. So looking at the little stuff first, those things might not even be there. Like you might spend an hour editing a chapter that you might be ripping out. Don't do that.
I think for my practical advice, as I honestly really enjoy editing. I like seeing it. I think that the writing and creation is like the hardest part, but it's already there. So your story's already there. So now you've got your skeleton. So now's the fun part. This is where you get to refine it and make it pretty, juice it up and let your brain, like the pressure is off your brain in creating the story. Now you just have to like fill in the fun details.
Yeah, you get to find all the gems.
Yeah.
I like editing.
Fun. So anyway,
we're
that's
both weirdos.
Maybe. I don't know.
All right. It's a necessary evil. So if you're someone who doesn't like it, find a way to love it.
Yeah.
If you love it, dig in because it can only serve you in the future.
Agreed.
But you still have to do it. Anyway, a huge thank you for all for listening today. Next week, we will be talking all about prologues.
Prologues.
The spicy discussion about prologues.
Right.
I don't know,
Oh, there's
spicy.
such a war when it comes to
There
prologues.
are feelings. There are definitely feelings.
So funny.
Don't forget, we have a Patreon. We have a Buy Me a Coffee. So if you want to give us any sort of digital tip because you liked what you heard today, we would deeply appreciate all of our lovely YouTube people. Like and subscribe.
We love you. Thank you, guys.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Squirrel Podcast for the Distracted Writer with Candace J. Thomas and Jody L. Milner. Please like and subscribe to our podcast for updates and new episodes, and find more information at our website, squirrelpodcast.com. Stay distracted, everyone.
3, 2, 1, all together now. Do, 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 do. But I love it. Laughing on this has a really unique wave.
Really?
Yeah, it's very charpy. Charpy.
Charpy?
It's choppy and short.
I like Charpy. You just invented
Sharpie
a word.
and short. I'm Dr. Seuss, y'all.